There is a secret cabal that owns Nigeria.
Only people who can accept the pain of rigging.
They call themselves stakeholders, but in fact, they are more than just that. This group operates in the shadows, pumping money and human resources to politicians, helping them win elections in both legal and not so legal ways. Sometimes they keep up appearances, fraternizing with people in power, people they consider to be their investment. I want to tell you their story, a story about these investments and how far the investors are willing to go to protect what they consider to be theirs. This story will reveal to you why elections in Nigeria are filled with so much violence. This is a story about godfathers and their chokehold on the Nigerian state. I hope I don't get in trouble with this one.
Now, the people of Okikono Anene from 1960 have never produced a senator. I used my hand to strike out the name of the person who won before, and I said it is important for me to give that region a senator in 2007.
To understand how these godfathers have taken over politics in Nigeria, I want to take you back in history to this ancient city in the southwestern part of Nigeria called Oyo State.
I started my political career in 1951.
This is the late Chief Lamidi Adedibo, the strong man of Ibadan. He was involved in Oyo politics from the 1950s up until his death in 2008. During the reign of this man, often referred to as the godfather of Ibadan, it was said that nobody assumed any political post in Oyo State without Adedibo's approval. That was how powerful he was. But Chief Adedibo didn't just stumble on this political power. His dynasty started from the days of Chief Obafemi Awolowo. Some reports claim that he got his start as a small-time organizer of political thugs for the Action Group Party of Chief Obafemi Awolowo. However, by the late 1980s, he had amassed so much power that politicians were beginning to seek his blessing to run for office. This political capital he had gathered was often through a combination of patronage, violence, and extortion. Soon enough, Adedibo would become an icon for aspiring political godfathers all around Nigeria. In fact, Adedibo once told a Human Rights Watch that he sponsored all of the politicians in Oyo State, from the governor to the House of Assembly members. Every single one of them went through him. But what does this sponsorship mean? Well, according to the politicians that have fought with and against him, Adedibo would usually mobilize violence and money in support of the politicians he supports. Having built an army of dependents that are usually seeking one favor or the other from him and are always in his house for arms, Adedibo was able to command these people to do his will anytime he wanted them to. Remember how poverty makes people open to manipulation? This man had a lot of poor people at his beck and call. Adedibo's style of campaign was to threaten people with machetes to come out and vote for his candidates. He was also known to use blackmail, violence, and intimidation to get his way all the time. Little wonder then why he was able to keep every politician in the state in his pocket. Now, the one time a sitting governor tried to defy him, this happened.
He's collecting 65 million naira a month as security money. Am I not entitled to 1/4 of that every month? Yeah, that's what you are not mentioning 60. No, I don't want anything from him. He should go away.
It all started in 2003. Rashidi Ladoja had just won election as governor of Oyo State. But his victory in the polls was largely due to the support of Adedibo. When I say support, I meant Adedibo helped in providing the muscle needed to rig the election in his favor. However, once Ladoja was in office, he tried to break free of Adedibo's influence. This would be the beginning of a long and bitter war that led to lots of destruction in Oyo State. According to Ladoja, Adedibo wanted access to the state treasury He alleged that Adedibu ordered him to turn over 25% of the government security vote, roughly 15 million naira per month, directly to him. Ladoja also refused to allow Adedibu to name the commissioners who would serve in his cabinet. This was reportedly one major part of their agreement before the elections. In response to these allegations, Adedibu described Ladoja as an ingrate. According to Human Rights Watch, the former state governor of Oyo State, Kolapo Ishola, confirmed that it was normal practice to consult Baba Adedibu on appointments, patronage, and contracts. By failing to do all of that, Ladoja practically signed his own death warrant. He started from the State House of Assembly. By August 2005, the tensions between Governor Ladoja and Adedibu had caused the State House of Assembly to split in two, with a majority of 18 out of 32 members publicly supporting Adedibu against the sitting governor. As they fought for control of the state government, the House was now divided against itself. In late 2005, seeing that the governor was not willing to play ball, the so-called G18 of pro-Adedibu lawmakers started the process of impeaching Governor Ladoja, a process that quickly turned violent, with one of the pro-Adedibu lawmakers reportedly stabbing his colleague on the floor of the state legislature when the first impeachment attempt failed. Some lawmakers were said to have brought out guns and fired into the air to ward off attackers from the opposing camp. Guess what? All of this happened in the presence of security personnel, and the police made no arrests. About a week later, armed policemen escorted the G18 lawmakers to the State House of Assembly for a second try at moving the impeachment motion. This again resulted in an hours-long gun battle between men of the police and armed thugs supporting Governor Ladoja, who sought to prevent the pro-Adedibu legislators from entering the House. Eventually, the G18 legislators broke into the locked House of Assembly and voted on their own to constitute a panel of inquiry to investigate allegations of misconduct, including corruption, against Ladoja. Also, moments after the vote, a very large group of anti-Ladoja thugs stormed the government house, looted and destroyed the governor's office. Again, the police made no arrest in connection with the sponsorship of any of this violence. 3 weeks later, the G18 voted unanimously to remove Ladoja from office, replacing him with his deputy governor, who happened to be one of Adedibu's loyalists, Christopher Alao Akala. After all the drama, Nigeria's Supreme Court reversed the impeachment in December 2006, calling it illegal because Governor Ladoja's removal was not supported by the required 2/3 majority of the legislature. As the Ladoja-Adedibu fight for control over Oyo State was raging in the southwest, another powerful power broker, this time in the southeastern state of Nigeria called Anambra, was enraged in a brutal war with his mentee.
This guest house you see have produced not less than 3 or 4 governors in Anambra. Here is my government house. Here is the seat of power, where I produce governors, where I produce House of Rep, where I produce senators in this house.
This is Chief Chris Uba, a very wealthy man from the powerful Uba political family. Chris Uba was at the peak of his power during the 2003 elections when he sponsored PDP candidates and rigged their election into office across Anambra State. In fact, he bragged about being the greatest godfather in Nigeria, stating how that was the first time an individual single-handedly put in position every politician in the state. Among the politicians Chris Uba sponsored in 2003 was PDP gubernatorial candidate Chris Ngigi. Now, what you're looking at right now are copies of the terms of their relationship. Here, this guy prepared a written contract and a declaration of loyalty that the governor Chris Ngigi signed prior to the election. In one of the documents, Ngigi promised in writing to exercise and manifest absolute loyalty to the person of Chief Chris Uba as, quote, my mentor, benefactor, and sponsor. He also agreed to allow Uba control over all important government appointments and the awarding of all government contracts. Looking at these contract papers, you will notice something interesting. The contract referred to Governor Ngigi as the administrator, while the unelected Uba as, quote, leader/financier. But that is not all. The contract empowered Uba to avenge himself in the way and manner adjudged by him as fitting and adequate, in case of any breach by Ngigi that could not be settled through mediation. After this agreement was signed, Uba swung into action, pulled all the plugs he could to rig Ngigi into office, and he succeeded. But just like Governor Ladoja in Oyo State, Chris Ngigi tried to break away from Uba's control once he got into office. According to Ngigi, from the moment he assumed office, Uba was constantly on call, demanding he take money from the state treasury and give it to him. Ngigi also claimed that shortly before his inauguration, armed men broke into his home and forced him at gunpoint to sign a pledge that he would pay Chris Uba the sum of 3 billion naira immediately after assuming office. When he could not meet up with these demands, relations between Ngigi and Uba deteriorated rapidly. And by July of 2003, a shocking story broke in Nigeria's newspapers. Governor Chris Ngigi was kidnapped by armed policemen and forced at gunpoint to resign, that is to sign his letter of resignation. Chris Ngigi believed the situation was all orchestrated by Chris Uba in an attempt to extort money from him. When he was confronted with all of these allegations, Uba dismissed them as completely false. However, Ngigi's resignation letter was happily accepted by the State House of Assembly. Despite these lawmakers knowing that the governor signed the letter under duress at gunpoint, one Anambra State legislator would later admit to Human Rights Watch that at the time, most members of the legislature were in bondage to Chris Uba in much the same way as Governor Chris Ngigi. Remember, this man had bragged about putting every politician in the state in their position. So, when he needed to use them to remove a sitting governor, it was an easy one for him. This is what politics in Nigeria is all about. Unelected men and women trying to hijack governments and impose their will on the people. Political offices being reduced to mere business interests for some powerful underground players, often in the shadows, dictating what should and shouldn't be. Ngigi successfully petitioned to have his resignation thrown out by the federal courts, and he remained in office but quickly found himself in trouble yet again. In 2004, thugs armed to the teeth with firearms and some locally manufactured bombs attacked Anambra State Government House in Awka and burned part of it to the ground while policemen stood aside and watched. Sounds familiar? Well, during the Anambra State crisis, an estimated 24 people were killed. This is the number we know of. There could be more not reported on. In his defense, Chris Uba told the Human Rights Watch that Governor Chris Ngigi breached their agreement. In his own words, quote, "I spent a lot of money to put him there, but I never asked him for my money back. Ngigi was trying to be smart, trying to run the government on his own. The problem is Ngigi, being a politician who did not invest 1 naira, not even 1 kobo, wanted to run away with everything and not even share 1 appointment." He concluded by saying, quote, "The problem is the immunity the governors are having. You spend your money to bring them into power, and they say, quote, go to hell. It should be just like investing in a bank, and then you have the power to make some decisions because of your controlling shares." This statement was attributed to Chris Uba. Yeah, he said these things. To Chris Uba, politics is just business. Sponsoring the governor is like buying a controlling share in the state's treasury. And this is what godfathers see when they throw their money at politicians. When they do all they can to win elections, all they see is a bank whose controlling shares they have just acquired. But how far are they willing to go to protect their assets once these puppets get into office? Well, you are not ready for this next part. When it comes to collecting what they feel is theirs, everything is on the table. You see, godfatherism has been reported to be one of the root causes of thuggery in Nigerian politics, and the main reason why the government has failed in its attempt to fight cultism in our society. During the 2007 elections, the PDP candidate for governor, Andy Uba, was reportedly handpicked by then President Olusegun Obasanjo. Andy Uba had served as an influential special advisor to Obasanjo for most of his 8 years as president, and it was believed Obasanjo wanted to reward his service by making him governor. It didn't matter whether or not the people of the state wanted him. Andy Uba is the brother of Chris Uba, but Chris Uba, who had been fighting Chris Ngige all the while, was not happy about this development. This caused a rift between the two brothers. Andy Uba took over the Anambra State PDP in a move Chris Uba described as, quote, a coup, and he installed somebody called Tony Nwoye, a former student union leader, as state chairman of the party. According to reports by the Human Rights Watch, numerous sources, including police officers and cult members, identified Nwoye as a prominent member of a major cult group in Nigeria. But this didn't matter to Andy Uba as long as he won the election. So, with the money Andy Uba's campaign provided, Nwoye immediately set about mobilizing funds to recruit thugs to ensure Andy Uba's victory in the PDP primaries in December 2006. In multiple interviews with several court members who described how they were paid to rig the primaries in Uba's favor by stuffing ballot boxes and chasing off legitimate voters, Human Rights Watch disclosed how one member of a rival court group, along with his colleagues, were actively involved in voter intimidation. And this is not so secret, as it has become a common occurrence in Nigerian elections. These cult groups carry axes and machetes and chase away any voter that comes near while they are voting. This act led to Uba's victory and subsequently PDP nomination, after being awarded 97% of all votes cast in the 2007 election. According to police, courts, and other sources, after the PDP primaries, Nwoye began channeling funds into the hands of members of his own cult group, while excluding the rival gang members he had managed to work with during the entire exercise. Several rival cult groups saw this as deeply unfair and they reacted violently. Some also complained that they were not paid in full for working on behalf of Andy Uba's campaign during the primaries. The resulting crisis was devastating. According to the then police commissioner, Haruna John, and some cult members themselves, at least 7 people were killed in a series of assassinations between these rival cult groups. Several of those killed had been gunned down in the streets of Awka, leaving local residents terrorized. But this violence through cult groups and other armed gangs is not limited to the southeast alone. Remember the Oyo State situation we started this story with? Well, after Ladoja resumed office in late 2006, the political struggle between the governor and Adedibu was waged mainly in the streets through regular battles between well-funded gangs. Many of those thugs were armed with machetes and locally manufactured small arms that were, according to officials, provided by their sponsors. There are gangs like this in every state in Nigeria, and they are used by politicians and their godfathers in the election season to force their will on the people. In March 2023, Premium Times reported that Nigeria recorded 109 deaths in 3 months, all linked to the 2023 election. After the election in May 2023, a report published by Punch newspapers recorded 238 election day violence and 28 people losing their lives as a result. And while you may see all these figures as mere statistics, make no mistake to think it doesn't affect you. The stories we just looked at may be from the not so distant past, but if you turn on your TV right now, I'm sure you will see a story about something similar playing out in the oil-rich state of Rivers. So think about this. At what point in Nigeria's politics can a young person in their 30s or 40s with no large bank account come out to run for a political office? Will it ever be possible for someone to win an election in a fair and credible race without resorting to violence, thuggery, bigotry, and all other social vices you can think of? In a time when godfathers are feeling betrayed that their political structure is being pulled down because the candidate they handpicked, bought a ticket for, and used all means to get into office is now trying to break free of their control. Nigerians need to wake up and see exactly how this current system of money politics is controlled by a few wealthy men whose source of wealth remains mysterious. And until we break free from godfathers, our destiny as a nation will remain at the mercy of the one willing to spill more blood just to fulfill his political ambition. Now, I'd like to hear from you on this topic.